Welcome to the D6 Family Ministry Podcast, a place where ideas, principles, and personalities come together to give you a ministry advantage that empowers the church and home.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here are your hosts, Marianne Howard, Ron Hunter, and Josh Wooten.
Well, I am so excited about today's guest. Kelsey Gothard is going to share some tips and tricks from the parking lot to the inner guts of your church on how to have a thriving, inclusive ministry.
You know, ministering to those with special needs can be intimidating in church leadership because in a lot of cases we just don't know what we don't know. And that paralyzes us and keeps us from making that jump to even start. And she is going to lay out some very practical advice and really get to the heart of, you know, if we are supposed to be for everybody and opening and all welcoming to everybody, it means everybody, regardless of their abilities. And this is a very powerful podcast that I think you're going to want to take note on. And you may notice that there is a voice missing from today's episode. Our fearless leader, Ron Hunter, actually at the time of this recording, we are currently in sunny Orlando, Florida, knee deep in the D6 conference this week. And so Ron was not able to join us on today. We will be glad to have him back in a couple of episodes. But for right now, we want you just to turn your heart and your ears and your focus towards Kelsey and the wisdom that she is going to be sharing on today's podcast after this message.
Give your children and grandchildren a way to treasure your handwritten words with our new Generational Legacy Journal. About You, About Me, Generational Legacy Journal will guide you in telling your story while describing your kids or grandkids in ways that capture their hearts and leave an inspiring legacy. The left side pages tell your story, while the right side tells theirs, from the trivial to the powerful. Your child or grandchild will know each insight came from your experiences and observations about their life, their curiosities, their big milestones, and more, drawing them in to learn from your memories, insights, and encouragement. All the while, they will intentionally bump into scripture and your faith values. Visit d6family.com to order your copy of this Generational Legacy Journal today.
We are joined today by Miss Kelsey Gothard. She is the founder and artistic director of Courtney's Corner, which empowers individuals with special needs to step into the spotlight and shine through the integration of the creative arts. Kelsey also serves as the kids director at the Donaldson Fellowship in Nashville, Tennessee. She is passionate about inclusive and vibrant kids and family ministries. She's married to Chris, and they have a sweet little boy named Fox, and we are longtime friends. Kelsey was actually a student in our youth group a long time ago, and we are back together again, and I'm so glad that you have joined us today, Kelsey. Thanks so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Well, today our discussion is around the topic of inclusive ministries, and we're really talking about how to equip both the church and families to serve all children. So, in a lot of our social context today, we hear about the word inclusiveness, right? So what is it that we mean when we say inclusive ministry?
Absolutely. So a little bit of what I want to kind of start off with is just terminology. So a lot of times we refer to this population or community as the special needs community. Specifically, then you start getting into labels, disabilities. What do we call this population? How do we talk about them? So I wanted to just share a little bit with you.
Please.
So CDC defines a disability as any condition of the body or mind that makes it more difficult for a person with that condition to do certain activities and interact with the world around them. So although people with disabilities sometimes refers to that single population, this is actually a diverse group of people with a wide range of needs. So this is often where we refer to that term special needs or special healthcare needs.
Yeah.
In a ministry setting, especially, we love to focus on the word inclusion when talking about ministering to these families and individuals, because we're focusing on all ability levels. We're focusing on the individual and not the label. So for instance, as a kids director, I get to work with children and families from birth to 5th grade. So when I think in terms of how do we minister to all kids, that means all. We have to think through all ability levels. And so disability inclusion means including people with disabilities in everyday activities and encouraging them to have roles similar to their peers who do not have a disability. This involves more than simply encouraging people. It requires us to make sure that adequate policies and practices are in effect in our organization. So inclusion should actually lead to increased participation in our ministries, not decreased participation because of a lack of preparedness to serve these families well.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of equipping that has to go on beforehand. And I'm so glad that I'm having this conversation with you because you're so passionate about it. Why are you so passionate about this?
Yes, so I am passionate about it because I had the privilege of growing up with a younger sister, Courtney, who had special needs. She was diagnosed with a rare chromosomal abnormality called DeGeorge syndrome. And so I not only grew up in this community, grew up in hospitalized settings, but I had to understand just how this label and diagnosis not only affected my sister, it affected me, it affected our parents, it affected our family dynamic in such a way that ultimately just shaped my life and played a factor into career choice and how close I wanted to live with home. You know, it affects everything. And so I had the privilege of growing up with her and just learning from her. And I had 16 beautiful years with her before she passed away. And kind of right in the midst of that, I kind of had this, we loved doing musical theater together. I did that growing up. She loved to watch me, participate in that with me. And so I just kind of had this dream essentially that I wanted to create a space specifically for kids and individuals like her to have their own space where not only are they just included in things that their peers do in the community, but for them to have their own space to do it and to shine and have lead roles in things like musicals and choirs. So I founded Courtney's Corner back in 2014. Technically, I think it was 15, but I had the idea in 14. Takes a minute to get things rolling, but yes. So we founded that just as a way, one is a platform to raise awareness, to build a community of support for these families. But I've also intentionally partnered with churches along the way. And so we're a mobile organization. So I don't have a building per se that we own or that we rent, that families come to us. We really look to partner with the community that these families are already in and active in to, again, further connect them, one, hopefully to a body of Christ, but also just to community and support in general, because these families often deal with so many things that unless you know someone personally, you just don't quite understand the gravity of what these families walk through.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to know Courtney. She was so sweet. I'm thankful for those 16 years.
Yes.
And this is just, even Courtney's Corner is just a way of the grace of the Lord showing up even after she is gone and has met him face to face. So I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for that ministry that you have. And I just think it's really awesome. So I'm proud of you, my friend. That's really great.
Thank you.
But, all of what you just said in describing even that ministry, in thinking about the local church, do you think that we're missing something, or do you feel like this is something that's misunderstood or disregarded altogether within the local church?
I think it is something that is maybe misunderstood for sure. I think there's a lack of acknowledgement, but I don't know that it necessarily comes from an intentional disregarding. I think it just comes from lack of education. And again, until you've kind of submersed yourself in this community or been personally affected by someone that falls within this population, I think it's hard for you to understand. And then how do we relate that to ministry? And so I think there's just a lot of aspects, and it is so broad that it feels really heavy to try to navigate if you feel maybe disconnected, especially in ministry when there's a lot of plates already spinning too, and we're trying to think through the church as a whole and ministries as a whole and how they come together. But I think for me, I'm so passionate about inclusion because it's not just for kids ministry. And I think that's a big misunderstanding. It is not just for that 2-year-old with Down syndrome who comes in for the first time and we love them. And then when they're in 5th grade, we kind of pass them along and like wish them the best. Mm-hmm. We have to set up from across the board. We have to set up our ministries in kids ministry to be able to, one, foster that relationship, make sure that we love that family well while they're in our ministry, and then hand off to the next ministry, making sure that student ministry is there to pick up right where we left off. And then college ministry, where do they pick up? Mm-hmm. And then beyond that, how do we plug them back into the community to serve and to be a part of the body of Christ once they're an adult? So we can't just look at kids when they come in and how can we help them for this 1 hour on a Sunday, regardless of how long they stay a part of our church. But what is our goal for them? We need to have the same mindset of the spiritual development and fostering that we want to do with, say, a neurotypical student that we have with someone who has any form of intellectual or developmental disability, physical disability or impairment. We want to set them up to be a full functioning member of our church when they're an adult.
Yeah. So would you say then that there are some unintentional barriers then that the church is setting up? And if so, what are some of those?
Yes, I think that's a great way to communicate that. And I think it's a good thing for us to just bring to the forefront of our mind as ministry leaders. So the first thing that I would say is physical accessibility to your building, especially if it's an older building. If it's something that you've added on to a lot over the years, or if it's brand new, or if you're a church plant, this is something that you need to think through is how easy is it for multiple. So, just in general, from a stimulating standpoint, getting from the parking lot into the building, how easy or hard is that? And then once they're in the building, to get to where that individual is going to spend the majority of their time, how long to get there? What are they going to see in their path to get there? Is there so many distractions or crowds or loud noises to even get them from the parking lot into, say, the kids ministry area? Obviously, I'll talk specifically into Kidsmen just because that's my world, but this applies to all ministry areas. So how accessible is your building? And then I think, again, just from lack of awareness, I don't think it's malicious. I don't think it's intentful, but I think we need to do well as a church staff to do our part to educate ourselves. These are families who advocate a lot at home and at in school for their kids. They have to advocate from a medical standpoint. And so I think it'd be nice to give them a little bit of relief of, hey, like, you don't have to advocate as hard to the church, because we want to make sure that we're already set up to say, hey, just come rest. Let us love on you. Let us support you. So I think that's a factor. And then just communication. I think just like that unintentional of, we carry around sometimes a fear of, I don't want to be offensive, or I don't know what to say. And that in itself becomes really excluding and isolating, because we're almost terrified to go initiate a conversation because we don't want to say the wrong things. Right. So again, just from the parking lot to, are we engaging with them? That family, for the first time families especially, is so hard. because they already don't know what to expect. Expectations are just really great, not only for kids of all developmental levels, but especially for families that have any form of additional need that they have to think through. If we could do our part to let them know what to expect before they walk onto campus for the first time, that is a game changer.
Yeah. Yeah. The preparedness, I'm sure, is a big, big aspect to this. To not act like as soon as someone walks in, well, that's an inconvenience because we haven't prepared for that. So in talking to those church leaders, though, I mean, some of these things I think you just shared, even thinking about going from the parking lot to where they're going to end up. But so let's talk to that leader who's listening, who's saying, okay, well, what's my first step? Like, what are my first few steps? Where do I start with this? Maybe I need something, or I need certain people or some resources. Can you speak to that leader?
Absolutely. So I think the biggest thing is I just want to be encouragement to you. I think that sometimes we feel the need of, I need to be an expert in this field to do this well. And you don't. You need to be aware. You need to have a willingness to learn. But I think more than anything, it's just positioning our hearts to say, when we say all, we mean all. So help me do my part to get us there. So one, just surround yourself with people that are invested or passionate about this. If you already know you have families who would identify with this population, reach out to them, ask them, hey, what has your experience been in our church, and how can we help bridge that gap to make it better? If you know local school systems who have a great special education program or after school anything, just reaching out and getting almost just like a list of people that you can continuously refer back to. Research other churches who may seem to do this well, and partner with other ministry leaders and learn from each other. I think more than anything, if we want to provide a community of support with these families, we can't just rely on the experience and the intellect that we have about this, but we want to learn from others and constantly be growing. And we don't want to be content with just where we are. We want to continue to get better. So just being able to surround yourself with a wealth of resources. But yeah, I just want to encourage you that this is something you can do. You don't have to go to school to do it, but we do want to position ourselves to be surrounded by people who are invested and who have had the time and the resource and the training to pour into your ministry.
Absolutely. So would you say then that there are some misconceptions about inclusive ministry? How can church leadership combat any of those that there might be?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions that I've seen growing up in my personal experience with conversation, or especially now with Courtney's Corner, when we put on a choir, when we do our spring concerts or winter concerts, we have a wide range of ability levels on that stage. And so I think one of the biggest things that we hear is people have a misconception that they can see all disabilities, excuse me. And so I think that is the first thing you have to understand, is there are some disabilities that don't have physical features. You're not going to know just by looking at a child what they struggle with, just like we wouldn't be able to look at a child across the street who is neurotypical and know the background and the home life that they have. We have to think through that same lens. And so in reality, 1 in 6 students have a developmental disability. So if you take that stat, 1 in 6, that is mind blowing. If you think towards your kids ministry or your ministry area, because obviously they start off as students, they become adults later. So think through that mindset. This affects more people than I think most of us are aware of. Yeah. And so that would probably be my first misconception, is that we can't, not all disabilities are going to be easily recognizable. And so we just need to understand that. And again, that's just where it comes back from leading relationally and getting to know each individual that's in your ministry, and then understanding their triggers, understanding how we can partner with them to create the best experience for them. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if 1 in 6 has something like that, we're talking about a bunch of kids here, yes. Thinking in your local ministry, and you personally as the kids director don't necessarily have eyes and ears all the time. And so you have to have volunteers behind you who are watching and listening and helping, so do they need training? What does that look like for you to equip your volunteers to be on the same page?
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. We're not going to be everywhere at all times. So those volunteers and those leaders are our best. They're almost that listening post for us, right? So they're the ones that have ongoing face-to-face communication with parents and get to hear like, hey, they're having a rough morning. You're like, okay, great. I know what to expect and maybe how to adjust my teaching style for the day. So I would say that training is definitely your friend. What that looks like and doesn't look like, that doesn't mean, oh, we need to all become certified in all things special education or anything like that. It just means we need to let our leaders know some of the information that we're learning. So for instance, letting them know, hey, this affects more kids in our ministry than we're aware of. This affects more, especially if you do have any form of maybe sensory room that is utilized at your church, or if you have a couple of students where it is easily recognizable that they have a medical diagnosis. Like, we're not just talking about them. Odds are that every classroom that you have open, one child in that classroom probably has a form of either autism or ADHD or dyslexia, learning disability, a hearing impairment, a visual impairment, sensory processing things. We all have sensory needs. And so we just need to think through that lens of this affects more people and train our volunteers to help understand that so that they can lead with more compassion and more grace and more one-on-one attentiveness. But I think another concept too is to teach them about people first language and just some small, easy steps towards communicating that will help set them up for success as well. So not only, and from an admin perspective of, hey, let's make sure we're keeping data. Let's make sure that we are observing and understanding and seeing, hey, if we see maybe a challenging behavior that was presented today, as leaders, as volunteers, what do we think caused that? Did we observe why we reacted this way, and can we do something to prevent it the next time? So therefore, it's not them negative reacting and us trying to fix their behavior. It's something in our environment that we can maybe control to help them have a better experience the next time. So I think just training of simple tips and tricks and strategies that you can implement in the classroom. And then obviously into parent communication, teaching your leaders and your volunteers and yourself as ministry leaders, how do we communicate to families? And, these families have a lot of negativity sometimes around them, maybe about their child's not meeting a milestone, or milestones look different for you, or, IEPs and all of these things that are just heavy and hard. And so when we can bring positivity back to them, it is not our job to diagnose. It is not our job to continue to point out, hey, they struggled today. They don't need to hear that. They don't need to hear that. Like, that's on us. Like, what did we do, or what can we do better to where that outcome won't happen next Sunday?
Yeah. So you've trained your volunteers. It sounds to me like you're alluding to some adaptations that need to be made for kids who might otherwise feel excluded or maybe even uninvited. What are some of those adaptations that you would suggest? I'd like you to answer that when we come back from this commercial break.
Are you concerned about your church's future? Will it serve another generation? The Bible says He is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and yet we often only know how to connect to Abraham. Let D6 help you connect with each generation. Your kids and grandkids are counting on you. D6 comes from the principles of Deuteronomy 6 and helps what happens in church also happen at home. Curriculum you can trust, discipleship that connects.
So welcome back. Kelsey, what are some of those adaptations that need to be made for kids who might otherwise feel excluded or even uninvited to your ministry?
Absolutely. So I think one thing that I love to do is utilizing peers as peer buddies. I think, again, if we can make our own children. I know that I do this with Fox. I try really hard to have him say, hey, go ask that buddy their name. Go ask your friends their name when we're in a park. I do this in general to anyone he sees. We want to go say, what's your name? And we want to create an environment where those kids are not scared. They don't have misconceptions. If we as adults have misconceptions about this population and how we interact with them, best believe our kids do as well. So it is our job to also do that with our kids. So one, I love peer-to-peer interaction, utilizing peer buddies or college students or adults who have a passion for this to then come and partner. So that is a great adaptation. If you have an individual in your ministry that just needs a little bit more of a one-on-one attention, or just to be there for redirection. And so it's not to necessarily correct behavior, just to remind them of, hey, let's go engage, and helping them engage at their own level. So I think a lot of times too, we think we need to, I don't want to say the word force, but like really, really try to get a kid to engage with exactly what our curriculum says we should be doing at this moment. And we need to understand sometimes that some kids learn just by observing. They don't have to do to understand and to get what we're trying to teach. So one, just having that one-on-one buddy is also going to be super helpful. If you found maybe negative behaviors reoccurring in your ministry, that's a great option. I think also setting up expectations, sometimes using visual schedules within your classroom of laying out what is expected, what's going to be next. So, and being consistent in that. So if every Sunday, if your programming is structured the same, that is going to also create consistency for families. It creates consistency for that individual, that they know what to expect, because that is often a really big trigger, is if they know, hey, after worship, we do X, Y, Z. And if for whatever reason that Sunday it's different, that could be a trigger for that child. I think environmental adaptations. So thinking through the lighting, thinking through the sound. Is your environment in itself overstimulating? Do you have too many children in a classroom? One, we always want to lead with a little bit smaller ratios of leaders to children, but we know that sometimes depending on space, it's not always ideal, but that's what we want to aim for.
Yeah.
And we want to think the same way through a sensory processing lens. We want to make sure that our volume at worship is not too loud. We want it to be fun and engaging, but I mean, even for me, like I'll get sensitive to that at some point. I'm like, ooh, I'm getting a little bit older. It's a little bit too loud for me. So just thinking through the lens of that as well. So just small adaptations that you can do, or just coming up with a couple of really small tweaks to curriculum. So you're not having to adapt and having a different set of curriculum for these individuals. I think that is also kind of back into a misconception. You don't have to adapt everything, because again, the goal of inclusion is more engagement and more participation in what we're already doing. If we continue to create something else that's still a sidebar, that's not doing what we're doing and what their peers are doing.
Yeah.
So we just want to have tangible tools to help them re-engage with what we're engaging in, any fidget spinners, any sort of fidgets to help them listen better in class, keeping their hands busy. Again, just get to know those individuals specifically, just like you would your typically developing students, and getting to know what they like and what they like to talk about. You want to do the same for all of our children in our ministries and adults. We want to get to know what makes them, what makes them click, what makes them go,
Yeah.
So just get to know your kids, and then know that it's not a one size fits all. I think that's one of the biggest encouragements that maybe I could give you as a leader. There is no cookie cutter answer to inclusive ministry. We respond differently to every kid. And so just know that there is grace in that. There are tips that we can do. There are things that we can set ourselves up on an admin side from the beginning to collect as much information on all kids as we can, and then use that appropriately. And also just knowing that something that works one Sunday may not work the next Sunday, and that's okay. You just learn from it, note it, just keep tabs on what you're doing, what's working, be open to reevaluating. Don't be married to any one thing, and just continue to learn. Just always be curious, stay curious.
Yeah. A lot of this conversation reminds me about what we at D6 love so much, and that's discipling our children and the generations to follow. And you're talking about even having kids, have a buddy and walking through life, and finding mentors or people who have been through this and are going through this, and someone to give you insights, which is a lot like discipleship, and so I think it's pertinent to ask the question about the family, because like you alluded to earlier, like those people are advocating for their kids in school and in, it functions outside of the house, and for them to walk into church. And as you know, I've got my 4 boys, and of my 4, I have 2 that are considered special needs. They have a hearing impairment. And so that's a disability that they have. And the weight of a diagnosis, the weight of a disability can often be so heavy and so lonely. It really can. So how can the church minister to those families outside of the walls of the church and more than just on Sunday?
Absolutely, Casey. I think that it's important for us to think through that as a leader too, of how are we going to come alongside someone who has a new diagnosis? How do we walk alongside someone who has had this diagnosis for years? And there's a lot of just a lot of history that comes with that. There's a lot of relationship. There's a lot of especially if they're newer to the church, maybe they've been to a church. What was their previous experience at that church? How can you learn from that and help recover that and redeem that a little bit and move forward? And so I think the biggest thing is just to show up for these families in unexpected ways, to go out of your way to just say, hey, I see you, I hear you, I'm here for you, and you're doing a great job. I think that we know we want to support we want to partner with all of our parents, right? But there's just a little bit of, sometimes it's a different approach of how we approach these parents. And so I think just going out of your way to say, hey, we're here. Just that aspect of acceptance, we want you here, I think is a big thing that they need to hear. It's not, hey, we're adjusting so that you can be here. It's, hey, we want you here. We value your family. We value your child. And we don't take that lightly. We want to steward that well. So I think that's the first position that we have to come to. And then just ask about progress. Hey, how are they doing? Hey, how was that evaluation? How are they doing in school? I know that this was a struggle. Really listen to those struggles that they're going through so that you can come alongside them and celebrate those victories, because milestones will look different. And so how are you going to celebrate those milestones, even with move up days? Okay. That's a big normal milestone for, 90% of parents aren't thinking, will my child move up to the next grade level? That is something that some of these parents are walking through. And so being able to think through that on the front end of, hey, even if we didn't meet that milestone, we're still going to make it special. We're still going to celebrate with you. But then if it's a little milestone, if it's a little victory of, hey, we didn't want to go into big room worship today or last week because it was too loud, but hey, today we made it in there for 5 minutes. That is a massive victory. We want to celebrate that. We want to tell the parents, hey, they are doing great and thriving in this ministry.
So, you talked earlier about sometimes we just in society are nervous that we're going to say the wrong thing, or that, we're going to be offensive in some way. So how do you ask parents what their children need in a way that's not offensive to them? Are there any tips or insights that you might have for church leaders on this topic and how to navigate those conversations?
I think it first comes into our check-in process and, your first-time family process. What are you asking first-time families? And are you gathering information to be able to have those follow-up conversations later? So I think it starts with just in general, what is your process? What are the questions we ask on the front end? So I would say we want to open and invite that conversation from the beginning. We don't want to get in 6 months and then say, oh, I think we should have had this conversation 6 months ago. So try to collect as much information on every kid across your ministry first, and then develop almost a process of, hey, they said, yes, my child does have XYZ. Great. I want to go follow up with them. I don't want it to be just an email. I want to go get to know this family and hear them one-on-one. Again, just making it as relational and personal as possible, but getting any kind of data that we can that will help us set them up for success. I think being able to talk about everything, asking questions, and even within that. So on your admin forms, when you're asking questions to get the answers that we need, rather than focusing on what we may presume a child cannot do, we want to ask it in a way of, hey, tell me what your child likes. Tell me what your child is interested in. We can still ask, what are possible triggers for your child? But again, we're asking that in a way of, hey, tell us about them. What do they like? What don't they like? Rather than saying, does your child do well? And well, that's still fine to say, does your child do well in crowds? Like ask those type of questions from the beginning, but we don't want to assume that they can't. And so I think just that expectation on the front end of just always trying to frame the individual first and not about the medical diagnosis. I think as ministry leaders, we're not a hospital. We don't need to know. Those things are important when we're dealing with medical conditions, but not necessarily from a 1-hour experience that we're partnering with them. So, hey, we want to partner best with your son or daughter in our environment. Tell us more about the things they like to do. Tell us more about things that they dislike, or do they thrive with a one-on-one buddy, or do they thrive on peer interactions? Sometimes it's as simple as, hey, do they respond well to male teachers? Do they respond well to female teachers? Just getting as much information as you can also help you place where they need to be and what class they need to be in as well.
And I'm sure that it helps to do that with all of your students and not just the ones you perceive would be needs something special, a special interaction or something. So,
and even with families who don't necessarily click, yes, my child has special needs on the front end. And maybe, I think that's a big thing is later on, we may see, there might be potential behavioral issues that we weren't aware of that we're starting to notice as a pattern. I think that's a tricky situation too, of how do we interact with that family and ask that, because again, we don't want to diagnose, we don't want to assume, but just being able to, again, we can ask once we've observed. We don't want to say, hey, they really didn't handle this situation good. We want to observe and say, hey, we noticed today that when we transitioned to something from what they liked into maybe something they didn't like, we struggled with that. Is that something you see that happens at home? What do you do at home that maybe we can help here to prevent that? So again, just the way that we communicate that is important.
Yeah. So we have a lot of church leaders who listen in. We also have a ton of parents and grandparents, caregivers who listen in regularly. And we so appreciate that and value that. So to that parent, to that caregiver, to those loved ones who are listening, what's your advice for them if they have a child with a special need or a disability?
So that's a big question and something that's close to my heart. So, I mean, my first response is just encouragement and just, again, we see you. We really do. We may not always know exactly what to say or exactly how to come alongside you, but we want to. So one, encouraging just to stay in community. I know sometimes it's easy to isolate yourself or to, maybe just not even know how to advocate for your child. And so if that's you, I would ask you to be brave enough to have that conversation with a ministry leader. If this is something that you feel like maybe your church lacks, one, do it with grace. Obviously, we want all grace on both ends. I know that you are used to partnering and used to advocating in other settings. And so again, we don't want you to forge the way, but if you can help ministry leaders understand the gravity of this need and where it comes from and the heart behind it, I think that will not only, that's almost a leading up moment, right? If we're lacking in something, we want your feedback. We want to get better at serving you well. So be open build relationships. If you don't already, I would encourage you to try to reach out and continue to build those relationships so that maybe you do feel comfortable saying, hey, I see that we're missing this and it hurts my heart. It makes me sad. So I think that's my biggest encouragement as far as inclusion in the church and making it better, but just in general of at home. Man, we love you guys a lot. We really do. And we're here. And I don't know. I love to offer rest and respite. So any ways that you can, one, as a ministry leader, if there's ways that we can partner to offer rest, we know it's exhausting. It is challenging. It is emotionally, spiritually, physically, mentally exhausting. Mm-hmm. And so, we really do have a heart to come alongside you. We may just not know how to do it yet. Mm-hmm. But I hope that this is encouraging to know that this is becoming a topic that that's my prayer, is that this continues to become a topic to where 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, you're not feeling the same feelings that you're feeling right now, and that we're only going to get better as a church body to minister and love on your family well.
Yeah. I love that. Well, Kelsey, thank you so much again for joining me today. All of these insights have been wonderful. Again, if you'd like to check out Courtney's Corner, you can check out their website at courtneyscorner.org. You can also get in touch with Kelsey there. Be sure to check out the resources that they have there. See what that ministry is about. Support that ministry. And if you have questions for Kelsey or her team, you can find a link there where you can get in touch with her. So thanks so much for joining me, my friend. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. It's fun.
Well, first of all, Miss Kelsey, I love that your son's name is Fox. That's a really cool name. What a powerful, powerful podcast. I wrote so many pages of just notes and wisdom from you about inclusive ministry. And I was challenged with a lot of things. And two things that she said that I just really wanted to highlight that landed on me was be aware and be willing. That is really great perspective. I love that, those nuggets of wisdom. Be aware and be willing.
That awareness and willingness for us at my church is what actually started our ministry to those with special needs just here in this past season of life. Even during COVID, we recognized that as we grew as a church, we had several of those with special needs within our congregation. And we just felt it would be great just to get them together and to listen to them, building that community of support, because we noticed we have several families here, and basically just asking them, what do you need from us? Like, how can we minister to you? And that was something that really was a game changer for us, because it wasn't us having to figure out and know all the ins and outs. And we were not experts in this fields, but who were? They were, because they were living this every day. It is their community. And it was one of the things that they told us what they thought they needed in a service. And we started this, what we like to call embraced service. And we have it after our Sunday morning services, and we give them the instruments. And it is very, it is not, I won't say unorganized, but it is a laid back, it doesn't have to be so programmed. And it's very short, and, it's very simplified. But it's just a place, it's like she said, providing them a space to meet and knowing that it's just a few key point people on our end, but they are running the ministry in themselves. And one of the other things that she talked about was, Courtney's Corner. We partnered, we found an organization within our community that was already providing services, but what they didn't have, and like Courtney's Corner, what she said they didn't have, was a physical space. So it made sense for us to just go, hey, we don't know what we're doing here, honestly, but we have a heart to reach this people group, and we have space. So let's figure out a night of the week that we can partner together. And so we opened our doors to Gigi's Playhouse in our community. And it's one of these things that we didn't have a lot of know-how or knowledge, but like you said, it was being willing and being aware that need was out there. And it was a game changer for us. Now we're known in the community as a church that seeks to meet the needs of these folks.
That's powerful. Well, tune in with us next week when we pick up with our next guest for our podcast. You're not going to want to miss it. We pray that you would continue to work towards connecting the church and the home. We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.